The restoration industry is under siege. Sales are soft, margins are razor thin, getting paid feels like pulling teeth. This is a wartime environment, and restoration leaders need battle-tested tactics that work when everything's on the line. You're listening to Mission Critical, the podcast where the industry's elite operators share the systems, strategies, and scars from the trenches. I'm Leighton Heeley, the CEO of Know How, and we spotlight restorers who refuse to go quietly into the night. Most people join a franchise, but Kyle Chason, well, he built one. He started out as the first franchisee of Best Option Restoration in 2017 with $2,500 to his name, alone in an attic on New Year's Eve, scraping blown-in insulation by hand. Today, he's the president of a 70-location network operating in 26 states. That climb didn't happen by accident. Kyle earned the right to build a franchise network by learning the soup to nuts of the restoration business. And his method can be boiled down to the super trifecta of the right people, with the right playbook, and the right kind of independence. In this conversation, he lays out what that actually looks like in practice. He also talks about his franchisees not being overly reliant on one source of work, explaining how they build direct referral machines, one relationship at a time. His ops culture also doesn't default to hierarchy. It prioritizes speed, clarity, and empowered decision-making, and his sales approach is built on reps, inputs, and a radical mindset of speed and ownership. If your team is slow, bloated, or waiting for work to show up, this one's a wake-up call. Let's get into it. Well, welcome everyone. Super excited to get into this conversation with Kyle Chason. He's the president at Best Option Restoration. And Kyle, you and I met over tacos in Denver. And I sat down, new to your brand, and I left super impressed with what you've built, what you're building, what your team is building. So welcome to the show. For those who are unfamiliar with you and with Best Option Restoration, how would you describe both you and your really exciting network to our audience?
Yeah, Leighton, thanks for having me today. I would describe myself as a guy that said yes. And I'll tell you briefly, go back to 2011. My folks were both laid off from their jobs. Same day, same hour, completely unrelated companies, no connection. I was in college at the time. So they get laid off, they go back to the drawing board, they end up getting into franchising. That is what led me to meeting the founder of Best Option Restoration, which led me into starting the first franchise in the system back in 2017, which ultimately led me to where I am today, where I'm leading our restoration franchise system, which has about 70 locations and operating in 26 states.
Amazing. And I think when you and I first chatted, I was really struck with just frankly the velocity of how you moved from this high performing franchisee to now driving growth across this. I mean, it's a pretty interesting story and case study in, let's just call it, I think I was reading something about the CEO of Costco, like started right at the entry level role, and now so he's seen the whole soup to nuts of the organization. And I mean, similarly, you have seen the whole, and you've seen these transformations. Like I bet the organization has really transformed since you were the first franchisee to it is now.
Yeah, it absolutely has evolved. I think many of the fundamentals have remained, but we're learning all the time, and we're always evolving to tweak, pull new levers, tweak the system, and continue building upon what we have. And yeah, I started in the trenches. I was a one-person operator and scaled out a team, added reconstruction, and then eventually exited. And the founder asked me to come help continue building the brand, and to which I agreed, obviously, because I'm sitting here. But I've kind of been through the cycle of business ownership.
Yeah. So you can relate. And I think that having been a franchisee, having been a franchisor in the past, I can say that it's actually not typical that like senior leadership has been in my shoes. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
From a franchisee's perspective. So, I mean, you've been in their shoes, literally.
Yeah, yeah, I totally have, and it brings so much empathy and love for what our franchisees are doing out there every day because I've lived a life for a long time.
Yeah. Let me give you an opportunity because one, you're going to have people who listen to our conversation who are considering jumping into franchising. You're going to have individuals who are restoration contractors, individuals that may not have heard of your network and your brand. You guys have had some really impressive growth. So, giving you full permission to brag a bit here. What are some of the things that you think makes Best Option Restoration, just a really compelling opportunity? Can you speak to, kind of what your vision is for the organization?
I'll kind of say one of our philosophies is we look for the right players, and our franchisees are included in that of being players in the Best Option Restoration family, and we want to continue to be be the leader in the disaster restoration space and continue to evolve and grow the brand. But we can only do that with the right players. We really don't want just anybody. We're privately owned, Leighton. This is our founder's fourth franchise system, and why that's important to the question that you asked is that the folks really matter to us. Our franchisees really matter. I address them as the Bohr family all the time, and I mean that. I think coming from a place of I was in the trenches. I had $2,500 left. I remember, so I had to make it work, right? And we have a bigger working capital requirement now. Talk about an evolving brand. However, I remember the first New Year's Eve, and I started my business in July, and so this would have been December the first year. I got the biggest job that I had yet. I think it was a $27,000 mitigation project. Pretty nice house. I felt comfortable managing projects at this point. I felt comfortable with the work, but I didn't have a big team. And nor did I quite have the resources like we have now of great skilled temp labor, great subcontractors. I mean, we can turn up very fast across the nation. At that time, all of those things weren't in place. Nor did I really have the money to spare, okay? So I'm trying to paint this picture for you to really understand. So I'm sitting there, I'm 22 years old, and I am in an attic. And for all my people out there listening who know a thing about blown-in insulation, I'm not using a blown-in insulation vacuum because this was an emergency project and it was maybe a 15 square foot spot, but I'm in this attic. I am alone. It's 11:30 p.m. My friends are texting me, am I coming to the New Year's Eve party? And you have that moment of, what did I do? What am I doing? And, that's when you look at the ceiling at night and you're just asking yourself and you're questioning, and that all business owners and business owners to be are going to have that moment. But come from humble beginnings, and I am so glad that I made the decision that I did. But I remember, the early days of being in that attic, and I'll never forget it. And what was I got a little sidetracked on my story. What did you ask me specifically?
Well, I mean, hey, now you have this this attic crucible, moment, right? And I'm just like visualizing you there, and your phone's blowing up, and you're probably hearing the customer having a fun time downstairs,
Yeah.
right? You're like, this isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
It's there's enough adages out there to paraphrase them to simply say. There is probably what you suspect, the dream of entrepreneurship and, the American dream, what you like it to look like. Let's maybe we obsess on the outcome,
Yeah.
but we forget about the process.
Yeah.
And So I'm curious, like just because I really think, I think anyone wants to hear the end of that story. So what's the end of that story? Because you're obviously in the cauldron of this attic, and so what happens? What's the
Yeah,
conclusion?
so I'm sitting there for hours, and I had never removed blown-in insulation at this time. I've been told how to do it, and I've seen the YouTubes and gone through the training. However, I've never done it, so I'm new to it. I'm very slow at it, and I'm pulling it out and second guessing myself. And to end the story, it really helped lay the foundation to continue to help me scale. So the job was more important than I even knew in the present moment. One, it was incredibly important to getting me to where I'm at because for tangible reasons, it was a larger job for myself at the time. I taught myself though that you need to keep your commitments and know why you're doing something, because when things get hard, if you don't know why what you're doing is leading you to where you want to go or why it's important or purposeful, you're not gonna persevere and push through. You're gonna quit or
Yeah,
give up. Yeah.
yeah, well said. And something you said earlier, and I just want to give a moment to capture this before we jump into some of these discussion themes that I'm itching to get into. You talked about at Bora, at Best Option Restoration, you are building a very strong team, you want to have the right players. Could you give us, like, just how would you describe let's call it the characteristic traits or the personality traits of who you would say fits that right team player profile?
Yeah, I think the right team is it's a few things. It's one of the principles is do what you say you're going to do. Follow through with it, and if you're going to commit to it, then do it. Two, being coachable and having a team player mentality. So contribution, right? Giving, being open to that, and then I typically, if you're a giver, you're also open to receiving. It doesn't always work like that, but those are two things that we look at because we have I'm the president of the company, and I'm take feedback, constructive feedback, and ask how we can improve all the time. And that's really important through our culture, and work ethic is what I'm going to add on top of that. Somebody had said, do what you say you're going to do, but there's also a kind of a quantity to that where you do have to be willing to put in the time and put in the work. And that goes for franchisees as well as our team. Of if you have, a bunch of folks who are checking a box there for 8 hours in a day or 10 hours in a day, but the impact was maybe only 2 hours of that day, that's not productive. That's not an efficient team. There's a lot of inefficiencies, and I think that exists in many companies, sadly, across corporate America. And we strive to not do that, right? To be efficient and have impact, and we do it with the right players.
Yeah. So, I can just think in a network with a shared playbook and a shared brand, with a foundation of one of the things we can all align on is we value doing what we said we're going to do.
Yeah.
What's downstream of a shared value like that, I can just imagine is just so many things that create grief for multi-location operators. In many ways go away, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not, why do I have to convince you on the merits of, delivering on these commitments that we've made to, national partner X or employee Y. And it's really exciting. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there are opportunities at Boar right now, right? And my understanding is that you're not slowing down.
Yeah, not at all. From a guy who's been here since the beginning, there's not a better time at Best Option Restoration because we have a very strong foundation, over 70 locations, yet we have such a big runway to grow and a lot of availability for the right franchise partners to come grow with us, which is why I don't believe there's a better time.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot, I think, making the restoration industry a really attractive vertical. And I think one of the drawbacks for some of the other networks is simply there's just too many dots on the map already, right? It's almost like this moment in the industry's history just came at a point of relatively oversaturation in terms of territory allotment, and so I'm really I've begun keeping an eye on some of your team's activity, and it'll be exciting to see you grow. One of the things that I found just really stuck with me when I left our first conversation was, and again, this is I think this is unique. This is not typical, and it is like a massive theme right now in the broader property restoration industry. Is that your team? Correct me if I'm wrong, but your team is not really beholden to, say, a large TPA program or large, kind of like locked in programs. You guys have really learned how to operate as, independent, organic growth, direct work companies. Is that correct?
Yeah, you absolutely nailed it on the head. We put a major focus on the direct work, going to agents, property managers, plumbers, and there's other even business people in local communities. But our franchises are, we teach them the model, and we train them, and we support them. We call it shaking hands and kissing babies, but we can't do that for them. I can't do that for a franchisee, and nobody in our team can. They need to do that. So we teach them that, and we set them up for success. They operate, and as call it hurdles arise in business, because they always do, there's a whole team here to support them. And that's different than what the perception is, especially in the restoration industry and franchise systems, because they're usually just associated with TPAs. And I'm not against TPAs, Leighton. We have some great TPA partners that we do work with, but that's not everything for us. That's only about 30% of the market that's out there. There's a lot of great business to get, and a lot of people we can help if we also go direct. So that we teach that in our system, and I've been in different forums, on call it Facebook forums, in kind of groups where it's independent or it's this franchise TPA thing, and they don't think that both exist, and it's okay. I don't necessarily need them to understand what we're after, but it's an absolutely wrong assumption.
Yeah. I was in, so just to put a few, data points on the table, and then I'd love to hear your response to just a follow-up question. We do all this data reporting, know-how with some of our partners, and shout out to the RIA and CNR Magazine. And we saw a significant drop in many regions of like claim volume. And that led in many ways to a very difficult year for organizations that I would say had an over-reliance on a particular, let's say, stream of revenue that they couldn't directly control or influence. And it was almost like a double whammy, because on one side, what they experienced, let's call it the risk of the over-reliance on a particular external source. And because they had relied on that, they had almost internally lost some of the capacity and capability to hunt for themselves, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense.
So I would love if, as much as you're comfortable with, there is a weak muscle in this industry, which is the ability to go for direct work, to hunt and kind of create your own opportunities. Walk us through that. Like, square one, where do you start, and how do you get your teams on board? And how do you think about approaching the market? It seems a little daunting and overwhelming for someone who it hasn't been a primary focus for them.
Yeah, I think the number one key is going to be reps. It's activity. It's not an ability conversation, Leighton. It is, are you willing to put in the time and put in the reps to make the goal of getting direct work even possible? Because five conversations, 10 conversations, 15 conversations, it's not going to do it. When we have a plan to get direct work, you need to attack, and I say attack because we're going on the offense, 80 to 100 folks a week that you need to be in conversation with, especially when we're starting from, like, let's use the assumption we're starting from zero. Someone is getting all their business from TPAs and vendor programs, and they don't know how. Step number one is get active. We could have all the strategy and planning in the world, but if you don't do anything about it, the results are going to be zero. That bottom line. So number one is a commitment to get active and actually want to drive direct work. Because if you don't want to do that, a sales coach is not going to help you. A system doesn't help you. Having a great production team with no work also doesn't mean anything. So you really have to get tied to, I understand what direct work is going to do for me, and I am committed to driving that direct work. And go ahead.
And tell me about that, Kyle, because like what I'm hearing you say, which I want to make sure that no listener misses what I think is like really the nuclear, opportunity of what you're describing here. I think what I've seen in sales teams is that teams become accustomed to really focus and be incentivized on the outcome and not the input.
Yeah.
Right. And you're almost flipping the script, and you're saying you need to understand that you have got to start to get really focused on, you use the language reps, and I've heard people talk about just like those input based goals.
Yeah.
So if we're looking at a dashboard, what are you tracking? What are you not tracking when you talk about getting the reps in?
Yeah, I mean, number one is going to be touch points. And when you don't know anybody, a touch point is an in-person visit. So when I say 80 to 100, the assumption is I don't know anybody. 80 to 100 visits. So walk into the office and talk to the individual. That is the number one metric that we're starting with. And the reason is there's no lever to pull. There's not a strategy to critique if we don't have, we're talking about data. If I can't even show you, Leighton, that I'm batting 0 for 100, if I'm 0 for 0, there's nothing to tweak. But I could come back to you and say, well, I stopped in at 100 and I'm 0 for 100. No, there was no good conversations. Okay, now let's maybe tell me about those conversations. You dig into the more the intangible, but the tangible piece is that route stop. And I really see this route to direct work. I paint a picture, and I like to simplify things because simplicity will move business. And you have the upstart of relationships, of direct work, and you have the maintenance. Maintenance is easy. This is where you say, hey, I'm having this happy hour, come on out. And they're going to come not because of the content that you're teaching, not because of the free drink. They're going to come because of you and the relationship that you have. That's the maintenance phase. In the maintenance phase, you also can just shoot a text over. You can just shoot a phone call over, and it's very powerful. It's very meaningful to that relationship, and it does continue to grow it and really maintain it. But you have to earn it. You have to get there. So it takes you back to trusting the process and focusing on the input, and the input is the number of touch points. And touch points in the beginning, again, back to the root, is you got to go stop in the office.
And Kyle, can you speak more to so someone that has really allowed this skill to atrophy, right? And it's just, you picture, I know it's maybe a terrible analogy, but you think about someone who just, takes a cast off after, say, 6 months, and that limb is weak and noodly. It's almost like for many companies, it's like, that limb has become weak, and there's not just only strength that has to be rebuilt, but there's almost muscle memory that has to be rebuilt. So take us to like the other side of 1,000 of those touch points.
Yeah.
What works when you're walking in and you're interrupting somebody? What have you found has been the best way to, get to the conversation qualify the conversation and create some type of a lasting connection. Are you comfortable speaking to that?
I'll speak to some. I won't give you all the lines that we go over franchises, but I can speak to some of the fundamentals. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the fundamentals of it is you are building a relationship. You're not selling anything. And I can't tell you how many times I've been going into a stop and I see another restoration company coming out and all they did is drop candy. And I've even talked to the individuals at the office that I'm stopping in. They said, we don't even know their name. Well, there's no relationship there. And so fundamentally, you have to build relationship and show up and be a resource and be consistent, back to this 80 to 100. And the follow-up to that is it's not just one time. It's not 100 new people every single week. You want to have repetition. If the conversation goes great, you're back in the next week. If the conversation doesn't go well, you might want to give them a couple weeks and so they can forget about you. Let 10 other reps jump in there. And then you go back in and you kind of get a fresh start. So to really root the answer is it's going to be to truly build a connection with the individual. And you're probably not talking much about business at all. Maybe 10% business, 90% life.
And one of the things that I've learned about you, Kyle, even in just the time we've known each other, is you're a relationship guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're clearly someone who values relationship. You know how to maintain relationships. What are some things that you think people typically do wrong when it comes to relationship building and relationship maintenance in a business setting?
Yeah, a couple things. So one, making too many statements, not listening enough, not asking questions. And to give you an example of how this happens in our day-to-day lives and many listening, think about the last time you got a phone call or somebody was selling you. Like, I pay attention to sales processes frequently, and I know when I'm getting sold and I like it. If I'm like, this is a good salesperson, I like this process, I know this is a part of what's happening, but I respect it. And I say, that's good because we have a connection now and I do want to buy from said person or work with said person. So what happens is there's too many assumptions made and there's a lot of statements made. Oh yeah, hey, we can help you with this water damage job. Next time you have a claim, just give me a call. Well, what problems does this entity even have? You have to ask to get to the root of it. So by the time you're done with your conversation, it's a no-brainer that they're going to work with you. Now you can assumptive close. It's just part of the process versus trying to push something on them that they may or may not be interested in, they may or may not want. And most companies have something valuable to offer, but they have to make sure the individual values that and the timing has to be correct. So the mistake is made is that when you're selling, and a lot of what we do in restoration is B2B because it's driving referrals and the direct work conversation. And so we need to connect with them enough that they're just willing to extend their trust to a client. And if I am pushing my agenda on them, that's never going to happen. They are not going to want to work with me or push their client onto us. So asking questions and understanding really what they're looking for is incredibly important. They may not care that you have 10 trucks or 100 trucks or that you have a 5-star rating. They probably do, but are you leading with those things? No. I mean, just talk to them, ask questions. And that's a really common mistake that's made. The second thing is a lack of follow-up. There's one conversation, they give up. I heard a stat, and this was more, I saw the headline, but it may have been something on Instagram, but it used to be 7 touch points, right, to really get traction. Now I heard it's 13. And
wow.
You think about the noise that's out there, I can say my attention span continues to go down, and I fight against it to try to stay sharp, but that's happening in society all the time. And so you have to have follow-up and be persistent. And it's not follow-up, again, that you're just stating what you can do for them. You're following up and asking questions and connecting with them.
Yeah. Well, so, I can't help but just like call out a conversation I had earlier this week with a marketing team member, and we were looking at some data, and I said, and how many touch points did that prospect have? And he's like, 59. It's like 59. That's like, oh.
It's insane.
Yeah, I was like, oh, but like, I mean, you said it well. People are busy, and in this industry, oh man, like there's so much noise.
Yeah.
You know what? One of the things before I want to unpack a little bit about how you think about operations, because I think you are going to really blow some minds with some people who have a very cumbersome approach to operations, but. Many people who I think are going to hear what you're saying, Kyle, they have to navigate a team that has become accustomed to not having to do the reps, as you say. And so what would be your advice to them in terms of how you get a team on side with this new approach that is going to feel, let's call it a little scrappy, maybe a little bit tedious? What's your advice to that individual? They're open to coaching, but they are anticipating pushback from their sales and marketing team.
Yeah, I mean, I think the three things when you're evaluating somebody is there's capability, there's willingness, and there's capacity. So we know they have capacity. If we're not busy right now, there's certainly capacity. So now the question is, do they have the ability? And if they have capacity and they have the ability, the last question is, are they willing? And it's very tough as a manager to drive willingness out of somebody. Some things they could do, though, assuming we have those two foundational things of they have the ability and they have capacity, is get buy-in from them.
Kyle, I would like to shift into another topic that I just find that you really have a knack for, which is lean and efficient operations. One of the studies that we do with RIA is the state of restoration. Sorry, that's CNR Magazine. One of the studies we do with RIA is the cost of doing business. It's like the big financial benchmark study in the industry. And I can boil it all down to this. Companies have to find a way to operate more efficiently in this industry. And having been in franchising, I also know that sometimes that operational layer can be a little bit cumbersome and a little bit, let's call it maybe really heavy structured. I've found in our conversation that you actually have a mentality around speed and agility in your operations. Tell us about, like, how do you think about like some of the principles of running a tight, lean, only the essentials operational approach?
Yeah, we have managed to stay lean, and it goes kind of back to the beginning of the conversation of having the right players. And when you do, a couple things. One, you need to have an open line of communication, because you can't shift quickly if your people aren't communicating efficiently. If it has to go from one, call it the lowest level employee, to their manager, who then doesn't know how to make decisions, and it goes to their manager, and then finally it goes to the executive. That's a lot of things, a lot of communication to solve maybe a simple problem, maybe not, but that's going to take, there's an extra week you just added because it goes place to place to place to place, and each one of those individuals has 100 things that they're working on in the week. And so having a streamlined, just maybe feedback loop is the right term. That may not be the right term for that, but just having a streamlined way that people can get things done, and empowering others to make decisions. What I do with our team is there's things that people know they can make the decision on. Yeah, hey, this is I'll use here's business card orders. I don't need to see every business card order. That would be an incredible waste of my time. A business card is very important, and the information should be correct, but there's no reason for it to go up the chain. And this is a low level example, but I think it highlights inefficiencies that happen in an organization, because all of a sudden that has to get escalated to then have another team review it, and then have another team go print it. and it's something that probably could have been cut out and gets done relatively quickly. There's a tendency to get in my own way, or a franchise owner or business owner to get in their own way. If you're going to give trust, give trust. If you're going to hire somebody, that means you trust them, and you need to give them the training and tools and have a good feedback loop and good relationship. But you're empowering them to make decisions. You're not hiring them to do their job. You are hiring them to do their job, and you're going to help them do so.
You know, one of the things that I have become a big fan of is when I see really, really sharp operators like yourself, Kyle, share things that are just totally normative to you, being like, this is how you do it, right? And for me to be able to say, hey, as someone who engages with a lot of organizations, that's really actually quite unique. So when a person is saying, well, how do you drive so much operational progress, Kyle, without, let's call it this operational infrastructure, be that people, team, like how do you stay so lean? And something you said in passing, you said, well, you have to have amazing people, right? And almost like it's a given. And the fact is that there are some teams that, as things are compressing in the industry, and yet there's also technologies that are accelerating certain things, there are teams that probably haven't done an honest look at, their team mix and ask that question like you ask is like, do we have the right players here? The second thing that you said, I think it's probably a fair point to make that for many people, if they were the president of a franchise network like you with dozens and dozens of locations, certain phone calls that would come in, you'd say like, why is this person calling me? Like, do they have no idea of the organizational chart that rests upon the, and what you're saying is, I interpret that as speed, right? Access equals speed. Access equals, the ability to be able to again get that decision answered. But then you're also saying, but you balance that with giving a person the ability to understand what they can make a decision on and empowering them to be able to be decisive. And so you've got great people, empowerment, I would say the ability to understand kind of, what the rule book is around decision making, and then access, right? Like I'm starting to see this like Venn diagram come together. I don't know if you think about it that way.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of taking notes mentally as you, of course, get to go back and listen to this, but as you just laid that out, yeah.
Yeah, to you, it's like, yeah, it's just how we do things around here.
Yeah.
To me, I'm just like, it's freaking smart, right? So
yeah. Well, we're both learning. This is great. Yeah, we're both learning.
So, and let me ask you just to close the loop there, going back to kind of a question I asked earlier, maybe just to put a spin on it, but if you and I were just to walk through some other organizations who are thinking about streamlining their operations, I'm sure that there's things that you would point out and say, why do you do it that way? From your time being an entrepreneur and being an executive in this network and just interacting with other businesses, you said you're very familiar with just walking into hundreds of businesses. What are some of the common mistakes or misconceptions that you think business leaders make and have that contribute to inefficient operation?
I think that there's too much time spent thinking about decisions often. I mean, there's too many opinions sought out often to make a decision. And I'm speaking really to, scaled out organizations, because it slows things way down. I mean, think of working with like a government agency of some sort. It moves really slow. And I have never taken a deep dive into a government agency, but it moves slow and it takes forever to get something done. I mean, they're planning now for 2020, like just winning we had a franchise that won a contract with a county, and they won the contract 5 months ago, and there's been 3 email, and that's the way you communicate with them, is 3 emails sent, and it's now in effect, but it took 5 months to get there. And I just wonder, me liking to be efficient and run lean and empower folks. I just wonder what is going on the inside of that organization.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes we do it to ourselves, where we crutch ourselves to not make a decision, and inactivity kills business.
Yeah. 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 I'm looking forward to seeing your appointment to the Doge committee or whatever,
I think I need to stay out of that.
You get my vote. So,
Hey, thanks. I got one.
well, I just want to call out, there was a bunch of things that we talked about that I think are so timely, especially right now, just launching into a new year. The way you think about people, and the way you think about empowering people, the way you think about getting back to activity and input type goals for sales teams to build these direct sales machines. It's an exciting time for you and your network, Kyle. For someone who wants to learn more about best option restoration, who is thinking about the opportunities that you've been talking about here, how do they get a hold of you, and what should be the type of questions they should be asking themselves before they reach out?
Yeah, I think the easiest thing is to go to bureaucracy.com. That's talk about access. It goes right to my inbox, and happy to select a meeting. Even if you're curious, we help. If you look at my LinkedIn, it talks about, we're a launch pad for new and existing entrepreneurs. And best option restoration is a system that grows with people. And it's a tool, frankly, for somebody who doesn't like where they're at. They have bigger ambitions, bigger goals, but they're not sure where to start. Could be their second business. It could be their first business, and they're just exiting, corporate America. But I'm happy to spend 30 minutes talking about what that, if we would be a fit and what that might look like in their life. And again, that was borfranchise.com, borfranchise.com. Just fill out the form on that side, and it goes right to my inbox, and I'll set up a call with you.
Folks, Kyle Chason, President, Best Option Restoration. I think that a brand that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. And Kyle, some of what you said, I think, is so timely, just considering the macro themes. We need to get back to activity goals. We need to get back to evaluating our people based on capability, willingness, and capacity. We need to get back to empowering people to think on their feet. Solid advice from a really exciting network. Thanks for sharing some of your wisdom, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. Special thanks to Kyle Chason for walking us through what franchise leadership actually looks like when it's earned from the bottom up, not handed down. He's not trying to build the biggest system, he's trying to build the best one. And that means no bloat, no guesswork, and no over-reliance on one source of work. Every franchisee learns how to generate their own pipeline. Every team knows who owns what. And every decision gets made at the speed of trust. It's not magic, it's just reps, discipline, and a clear standard for what good looks like. This is the kind of leadership the industry needs more of. Grounded, fast-moving, and built to last. Thanks for listening to Mission Critical. See you in the next episode.